Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Conflict, Mediation, and You. We're continuing our conversation with Jim Seckman, CEO of MARR, and we're specifically been talking about addiction and conflict and mediation. And in this episode, we're going to focus specifically on the mediator. Stay tuned. Hi everybody. Here we are again, another episode, and actually we're doing a third segment with Jim Seckman, CEO of MARR, and we've been talking about addiction. If you have any questions while we're going throughout this, we want to make sure you know how to contact us. Center for Dispute Solutions, 404-991-0072. Jim, how can they contact MARR?
Sure. MARR, the best way to do it is to go on the website, and you can use your computer or your mobile device. Just go to marrinc.org. That's MARRINC.org. And all the phone numbers will be there on the website.
Thanks. If you haven't been able to see the other episodes, go back. I mean, there's a lot of great information there about conflict between you as a loved one or a family member and someone you love as an addict, or even as a business owner and someone on your team who's an addict. I think there's some Jim's really clarified a great deal for us in that. Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking me to come here and being here.
Yes. This time we want to focus specifically on the mediator in the room, not the loved one,
Right.
and
Right.
not the other. Now they're still in the room, but we want to draw some tips for the mediator, what to watch for. One of the things that's constantly driving us as mediators is the capacity. We
Right.
have to be able to, can this person make decisions on their own behalf? Do they have enough information? But you've already told us about damage with the brain, and I want to ask then, what's the difference between a recovering addict in the room and a non-recovering? Is there a difference?
Yes, there is. First of all, when you think about the word recovering, you have to think about it from a disease model. For example, my oldest brother is in recovery from cancer.
Okay.
He's not cured of cancer. And so that means that while he is in remission from it and there's no sign of cancer in his body, that and in some ways that's how we talk about addiction in remission. Recovering is pretty synonymous with that, actually.
Okay.
And so if you think about that, then while my brother can never say, I'm cured of cancer, I don't have it anymore, he can definitely say I'm in remission or I'm in recovery from it. Now, he still suffers from the effects of the cancer and the treatment of it, but he is, for all intents and purposes, healthy.
Right.
And over the past several years, he's been getting healthier. So now if we think about addiction in that way, because the cancer caused very real damage in my brother's body, we have to think about addiction, the use of drugs and alcohol causing that same very real damage within the brain. And like Rick said, if you haven't seen the first episode, please go back and look, because I explain how drugs and alcohol do damage the brain. But what happens is, as I explained, the change in form and function of the brain create problems for the person's thinking processes. Also, one of the reasons that we consider it to be only in remission is because of the change in the memory circuits of the brain, the memory structures of the brain, and the addict will always remember the link to survival that the drugs provided.
Okay.
So that pleasurable link that now all of a sudden I link that up with survival, the addict will always remember that. And so that's why it's a chronic disease. Is because if I go back and use again, my brain will click into that same place again.
Wow.
Just like my brother's cancer or diabetes, for example. Diabetes is a chronic disease. There's always something that the person has to be doing to take responsibility. Now, saying that, I actually like it that we know addiction is a disease, because it makes the person responsible for themselves. If I have diabetes or I have some other chronic disease process in my body, I have to be responsible. Nobody else can be responsible for me. It has to be me. So, I actually like that. And so anyway, a person in recovery is a person who has stopped using.
Okay.
Basically. So let's say I drank alcohol, and I was an alcoholic. I was addicted to alcohol. Then not in recovery means that I am continuing to drink.
Okay.
I'm still using. I'm still doing all the behaviors. I'm still doing that. In recovery means that I have stopped. That I have stopped drinking. So there's that very clear separation between using and recovery.
This person,
Mhm.
we've already
Recovery,
talked about.
right.
I mean, no, this person, addict, who's not recovering,
right,
still
right.
using, has diminished reasoning capacity.
Correct.
So it's even a capacity that we need to be suspicious of, especially as a mediator.
Yes.
This person is no longer using. How can we trust their
Yeah,
reasoning?
good question. Very good question. A lot of that just has to do with time. Because, again, remember, the brain has been physically damaged. Now, the brain can heal, but it takes time for the brain to heal. There's two things there's a lot more than this, but there's two main things that need to happen in the brain. The actual structures need to heal within the brain. That dopamine pathway needs to heal, and there's some very good research out right now that talks about the prefrontal cortex, and there's 2 points in here that need to heal. It takes about a year for these to heal up completely.
Wow.
The other thing that needs to happen is that the dopamine levels that have been so depleted and manipulated by the drugs and alcohol need to come back to normal. And those don't bounce back very quickly. You're talking 6 to 8 months before those are back in a normal thing. And this is what I appreciate in 12-step programs, for example. The wisdom of the 12-step programs is that they have these cliches, and one of the cliches is no new relationships for a year.
Huh.
Because they know that it takes about a year for the person to be thinking rationally and not just jump into a relationship. And this is why the 12-step program has sponsors, have meetings, because the person can then go and get advice and strength and hope and experience from other people so that they don't have to try to make the decisions themselves. Because for the first 6 months, they're just not real good at making clear decisions on their own. Now, if they get help, they tend to do pretty good. So, more pointedly to your question, it depends on the time period that the person has been in recovery. When did they stop using? If it was 2 weeks ago, you're not going to get much headway.
Okay.
You're going to have to keep everything really concrete. If they have 6 to 8 months, things are going to be a lot better. If they have 2 years, things will be a lot better. Now, let me just say, this is kind of like that old adage, I broke my arm and I went to the doctor, and the doctor says, we're going to set your arm, it's going to be perfect. Well, can I play the piano when it's healed? He said, well, sure. Well, that's great, because I couldn't play the piano before. And so the warning here is that the behaviors that the person had before maybe they started drinking, those are still going to be there. That person, maybe there were some problem areas that may have precipitated the drinking at first.
So like anger, if they were had an
Right.
anger management problem.
Exactly.
Before. Okay.
Yeah, that's still going to be there, and so they still need counseling and therapy, and so there may still be those issues there, but that's not really what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the effects of the drug and alcohol, and those do lessen over time.
Okay.
And it just takes time. Time really is the great healer.
Well, and that's the good news. I mean,
Yeah.
there is healing available, and there's a process for getting
Yes.
that
Yes.
healing. But as a mediator, we have to be concerned about capacity,
Right.
but we can't screen these. Hi.
Yeah.
Are
how
you
long-
yeah. Are you still an
Are
addict?
you using it?
Yeah. So
I got this breathalyzer here. I want you to blow into it, right?
So yeah, I mean, but once if that information comes out, we've got to have some
You've got to
tools.
back up and rethink how you're doing things.
Right.
Because you need to remember if they are, one, if they are still using, and two, if they are very early in recovery, and I would, all right, very early, what's that? A month or less. Because what we know is it takes at least 90 days for them to start clearing.
Getting it out of their system.
Getting it out of their system, and their brain to start clearing from the effects of the drugs and alcohol. So anything under like 90 days, you're going to have a great deal of difficulty. Doesn't mean you can't do mediation. Just means it's going to be, you have to switch how you think about it. Yeah.
Oh, so the mediator, just having this information can be really valuable, because let's say you have parties come in, and one of the parties says, well, I'm in recovery,
Mm-hmm.
and if I don't know anything about addiction
Right.
or recovery, then nothing comes up for me. But if I do know, what it
Yeah.
is that you're sharing with us here, then I say, okay, well, how long have you been in recovery, or
Mm-hmm.
are you clean, or how many, what is it? Well, anyway.
Yeah.
But in some way, get that information so that you have a better idea of how you can operate with this
Right.
individual.
What you need to do.
Yeah. Okay.
Whether, and at this point, let's say the person's been in recovery for a month.
Mhm.
Well, if they say that, if they're willing to say that, then I know as a mediator, I'm not going to be able to do anything really abstract with them.
Okay.
Because the prefrontal cortex it's just not up to snuff, so
Okay.
to speak. And so I'm not going to be able to go into anything really abstract, because they won't get it. They're going to struggle with getting that at that point. And I don't care what their IQ is, the same issue. So, and I think that's important for the mediators to remember, is that, because we treat physicians as well as persons who are, in poverty level.
Mhm.
And addiction's the same for all of them. We treat extremely high IQ patients. We have extremely high IQ patients, and we have extremely low IQ patients, and it's the same thing. It's the
Same
same thing.
behavior.
Same behaviors, same denial, same everything. It just frustrates the ones with the high IQ more. Actually, the ones with lower IQ get it.
Uh-huh.
Well, yeah, I did use, didn't I? Yeah, you got it. The ones with higher IQs, they have trouble getting that.
So they might still be in denial, even though they're
Yes.
in recovery.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
So.
So knowing all of this, and I have a feeling that this discussion could go on for an hour or two or more, and we don't have that kind of time right now. But what is there something that some measure or some way I can establish an atmosphere to be able to interact with the party in recovery or recovering?
And
Yeah.
before you go there,
Uh-huh.
give you a moment to think about it. Let's take a break and hear from our sponsors.
Okay.
10 years to learn the business. 10 years to make a name. 1 year on your own. It takes time to build a small business, but only 60 days to transform it with email marketing from Constant Contact. Sign up with Constant Contact and get 60 days of free email marketing to generate referrals, connect with clients, and build the business you've always wanted. Constant Contact. Start your 60-day free trial today.
What happens when soldiers come home? Brene Foundation offers hero support to ensure that our heroes abroad can continue to be heroes at home. We link veterans with organizations who are dedicated to guiding the transition from military hero to civilian hero. If you want to find out how you can support our troops at home, please contact the Brene Foundation or visit brene.com.
Okay, we're back, and we're talking with Jim, and the question before we went to break was around tactics that the mediator can use to in dealing with recovering
Right.
addict. Okay.
Well, and again, it depends on the length of time they've been in recovery. But if you're picking up that they have not been in recovery that long, that perhaps they're capacity, their ability to self-determine isn't, really what you would want, then I would back up, or whatever phrase you guys would use for that, and switch over to looking at something a little more concrete. When you're thinking about an agreement, for example, the loved one may say, "Well, I want you to be a better spouse." Well, that's kind of abstract, and I'm not going to be able to get that, particularly early in recovery. I won't be able to get that. So you might say something like, if I say, "Oh, I want you to be a better spouse,"
What does a better spouse look like to you?
and so I would have to come up with specific behaviors.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that mediators need to look at, is you need to look at specific behaviors. So it needs to be behavioral. And they can be measurable. In other words, how would I know that you're doing this? So it could be an immeasurable objective that you're looking at. It needs to be something doable as well, because early in recovery, for example, that better spouse example, I won't know how to be a better spouse. I won't know how to do that. I may want to with all my heart, but I wouldn't know how to do that as even early in recovery, because I've been so lousy at it for so long. I wouldn't even know how to do that. And so the person in recovery will need some help with that. What would that look like? Well, why don't you spend more time with the kids in the evening? Why don't you, from 7 to 8, watch their TV show with them? Oh, yeah, that might be a good idea. So a lot of times, the person in recovery really wants to do good, really wants to be better, but they just don't know how, because their behavior has been so radically focused in the other direction for so long. And so I think that for the mediator, they can really be helpful by establishing what's doable for the person, and what's really these concrete behavioral goals. That will really help the person. And again, I know I referenced 12-step meetings before, but there are these phrases within the 12-step program that are like that. Don't drink and go to meetings. Well, now, to us that sounds, doesn't that sound kind of obvious? To a person early in recovery, that is just not that obvious. And they'll have to tell themselves that, or have their sponsor tell them that. Well, you need to go to a meeting. Oh, yeah, you're right. I haven't been to a meeting in 2 days. They need to be reminded of those behaviors. So I think that writing a plan out of these doable goals, these behavioral goals, these concrete goals, would be extremely helpful for the person. And you could tie in, you could ask the person, what would your sponsor tell you to do? That will immediately click into, what they've been hearing in the 12-step program. And that's the way to help them come up with solutions and ideas themselves, is to draw from other people's ideas who've been in long-term recovery.
And if they don't have a sponsor?
Might be a good idea to get one. Now, I know you guys don't necessarily give advice like that, but you could ask them what is usually recommended, especially if they've been through treatment. They know what's recommended. And what has been recommended to you about how to remain in recovery.
If you had a sponsor, what do you think the sponsor?
If you had a sponsor, if you've been to any meetings, what are the kind of things they have said about that? And they might reluctantly say those kind of things, because some people think they can still do it on their own.
Right.
And it's simply just not going to work out.
And we have the opportunity in mediation for someone to go to the phone, or we can take a break and they can get advice. So maybe
That'd be great.
if they could even, why don't we take a break and you go
Call
talk
your
to
sponsor. Yeah.
Talk to your sponsor.
Because sponsors are typically available most of the time. Now, they may need to call back if they're at work or something,
Right.
but people call their sponsors all hours of the day and night. And so that's actually not a bad idea.
Would it be beneficial to have the sponsor there in the room as?
I don't know that a sponsor would agree to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
A sponsor's job in the 12-step program, a sponsor's job is to provide experience, strength, and hope, and kind of mentor the person through the early or wherever they're at in recovery. You can be in recovery for 20 years and still have a sponsor,
have a
and
sponsor,
you should,
right,
as a matter
yeah.
of fact. But you know, kind of early on, they're guiding them through the 12 steps. And the 12 steps are a wonderful tool. You could use that too. And I always advise people to become familiar with the 12 steps. And for mediators, absolutely, become familiar with the 12 steps. That way you can say, well, you know, this issue that you're having sounds an awful lot like step 7 or step 5 or step 9. You know, and number one, you'll impress them when you do that. But number two, then that will force them back into thinking in recovery rather than thinking out of recovery.
Right.
So this is just another tool that
Yes.
mediators can have in their kit. And when you said that to impress, I said, okay, the big book.
There you go. Yeah, the big book.
Okay.
I think that you should be familiar with the big book. Now there's the AA big book specifically written for alcoholics, but a lot of people read that. There's the NA book, Narcotics Anonymous, which most drug users will use, and there's a little bit different emphasis in it on the process of it. But there's all different kinds of meetings. There's HA, there's Heroin Anonymous. There's for everything you can think of, there is a 12-step meeting. Particularly in larger metro areas, and so there's always that recovery resource available. So whether it's the big book, whether it's the steps, whether it's the sponsor, they have those resources available to them for free. I mean, okay, the big book costs $8, but
It's a free online though, isn't it?
you can get anything you want in big online. Yeah, I can look up anything I need to in the big book online.
Yeah.
And so, if they come up with some kind of excuse why they can't do whatever, then okay, there's still an addictive process at work
That they're working
in their
through.
thinking. Their
Yeah.
addictive thinking is still active.
Affecting
Yeah.
their thinking process.
Yeah.
Along that line, can you identify some sort of warning signals? I mean, that if I'm the mediator in that room and the addict is doing or saying either early recovery or non-recovery, what behavior should I be watching for to stop this and get out of there as quickly as possible? I mean, we can't go forward with mediation.
Right. Well, I think one, if you pick up that they are actively using, I mean, if they're high, if you smell alcohol, you may as well
We're
end
done.
it because
Right.
it's not going to go anywhere. If they're acting agitated or can't sit still or just saying all kinds of crazy things and laughing a lot, you know they're high. If they're lethargic and really hardly respond at all, they are actively using. They're high right there, and so there's no reason to go.
Right.
No reason to do anything else. Beyond that, though, if they start really being very resistant to the process, if they start, we talked before about the denial mechanisms of rationalization, minimization, projection, and blaming.
Right.
And if they start into those are going to throw up a red flag for you that something else is at work here. Something's not right. They're not thinking in recovery. They're still addictive. They're still thinking like an addict.
Right.
So I think that watch out for those denial mechanisms. And by the way, it can be if they're overly compliant. If they're
Just want to get out of here.
just schmoozing you and just and you think to yourself, well, this is really the nicest guy I've ever met.
Easy
something-
agreement.
Something's wrong.
Yeah.
Something's wrong. And so when you start seeing those things, those ought to start throwing up red flags. And you probably may not even need to get out of there soon because it may be over soon with or without your consent.
Okay, yeah, right.
Right.
And during the break, you mentioned this kind of confusion.
Oh, yeah.
Paying attention to.
Sure, and I think that for mediators, this is a trick that counselors use, and it stems from a saying by Lao Tzu, the founder of Taoism, who said, "Knowing others is wisdom; knowing oneself is enlightenment." And I tell this to counselors all the time, that you need to be aware of your feelings in the context of therapy, in the context of the counseling session. Now, I realize what you guys do is not counseling, but you still need to be aware of yourselves in this. And yeah, if you find yourself feeling confusion at what's going on, but everything seems obvious, you know, but you can't figure out why you're confused,
Yeah.
then that tells you that's a huge red flag that there is something else going on. Because that is a classic feeling that families who are surrounding an addict will feel. They'll feel confused. They will feel like, well, maybe I'm the crazy one here.
Yeah.
You know, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. If you start feeling any of those things, something's wrong, and you need to start, you know,
Go to caucus. and
whatever.
break it.
Yeah,
Invest-
whatever you
explore
guys
it.
say. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Well, it might not necessarily mean that you're dealing with an addict. It could be something else.
True.
but
It could be,
that's
yes.
a good piece of advice there.
It could be, because there are certain psychiatric diagnoses that do the same exact thing. In some of the personality disorders, you will feel the same exact way. In someone who's antisocial, for example, you will feel confused and like it's your problem and not theirs. That's it. Just they are very, very good at that. And so you're right. It may not be an addict. It may be something else going on. But the clear thing is something else is going on.
Yeah, and you need to get in touch with
and you
it.
need to get in touch with that.
Yeah.
I absolutely guarantee
Yeah.
you that.
Yeah.
Because you guys are trained to be objective. And if you start having feelings, something's wrong. And those are positive or negative. If you start thinking, I really like this guy, something's wrong. If you start thinking, I really hate this guy, something's wrong.
Yeah.
And so listen to your feelings. That's the best tool you've got. Listen to your feelings.
Well, I could see some benefits of maybe even having some training from someone like you for mediators at characteristics of addiction, and then we could talk about tactics or techniques that mediators could draw
Yeah.
upon.
Because I really, you know, I was talking to a counselor the other day and I said, boy, you know what? I could see counselors benefiting from being trained by mediators in terms of being objective and clarifying and, you know, doing what you guys do. But it could be vice versa as well. Mediators could use a little therapist knowledge and tactics to help out.
Especially
as
with
well.
the specific field. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
Because I don't, I mean,
Yeah, well, we've had counselors in mediation training.
true.
So that's, and they do
Oh, yeah.
benefit greatly from the training.
Yes,
So, I mean,
absolutely.
We've had that experience, so.
Yeah.
But it could, as you said, it could go the other way too. for
Could,
the
yeah.
mediators, which
Yeah.
I really am looking forward to getting more information from you and probably going through some training with this, so.
Sure.
The clock has stopped.
We
We've run
need,
out of gas.
yeah, we need to pull this car over. Can we remind them one more time how to contact us?
Well, that's usually your job.
Okay,
Ron.
all right.
You know, we're out of gas, the car's drifting now, so.
Jim, one more time.
One more time, marrinc.org, marrinc.org on your mobile device on your computer.
And Center for Dispute Solutions, 404-991-0072. Jim, we are really appreciate
It's
you.
been my pleasure and my honor to be with you guys
Thank you.
today.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks
Thank you
very
for
much. I
coming.
appreciate it.
Take care.
All right.